Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I am Dr. Andrew Scaff. He is Dr. Michael Werman, Esquire. On today's show, we'll eventually get to our third part of our Royals preview for the 2024 season. We'll be talking about the infielders today. We'll also talk about the NCAA basketball college conference tournaments. We'll be making some predictions for who we think might win these tournaments from a bettor's perspective. But we'll kick off today's show with the ongoing NFL free agency stories that have been traveling around in the last couple of days. Mike, there's a couple pretty exciting, bits, especially for us as Chiefs fans, that Chris Jones has signed a massive deal. And we'll get to that in just a second. But the question I have for you first, though, is were you surprised? Were you more surprised to see the Eagles signing an even more expensive running back than what they let go, and an older Saquon Barkley, or were most more surprised to see a career New York Giant in Saquon Barkley moving to the division rival Eagles?
I guess technically I would be more surprised about the Eagles picking up another running back that is more expensive maybe than the DeAndre Swift was a pretty good pickup, I think. But I think Saquon Barkley is more complete. I guess picking up Saquon is more surprising, although maybe you could say Saquon, it's surprising that he went to the Eagles because, well, it's a divisional rival. But I don't think players really have those. They maybe they do to some degree have rivalries with the other teams, but for the most
Those
part,
deep, passionate sort of dislike
it's
of the. It's I don't think
Barkley.
it's as bad as it used to be, at least anyway, right? Is that your take on it?
Yeah, I don't think it's as bad as it used to be. Well, Tiki Barber was really upset
Exactly.
about it. If you see, he was said like Barkley was like dead to him or something like that. Wasn't that what he said?
Right.
Uh,
Yes.
and Saquon himself is, I was looking him up because he went to Penn State, so I wasn't sure exactly where he was from. He's from New York. He was from the Bronx. So I guess he is leaving New York to go to Philadelphia. So maybe you could say that Barkley himself maybe would have disliked the Eagles as a
Maybe
youth.
as a kid. Yes. Yeah.
It's not like somebody was he was because I was actually wait, no, he went to no, he was born in the Bronx, excuse me. And then he moved to Pennsylvania, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Allentown. So maybe going to Philadelphia is not that surprising because he went to Penn State in college, and then he lived in Pennsylvania much of his life. So maybe that's not as unusual. I was thinking if
Yeah.
he's I guess if you're just from the Bronx, that would be unusual. But I think he's going back to Pennsylvania, and the Eagle. The idea is, well, if you want players, especially if you've made a decent amount of money in your career, which Barkley has, even though running backs maybe you could argue are underpaid compared to other position groups, at least right now in the NFL. Barkley is he is getting on a team that is a contender for a championship, even though they fell off a bit last year. They were still a playoff team. They very nearly won the Super Bowl against the Chiefs 2 years ago. So,
Oh.
if you're Barkley, maybe this makes a lot of sense. You're going to a top team, a team that likes to run the ball, one that has, So I see. Yeah, I don't. I so I guess I'm most surprised that Philadelphia is beefing up its running attack when I think that's their strength, and maybe they need to do something else. I don't know, but I don't know I don't know what they need to do though, because a they have good offensive weapons kind of everywhere.
Hmm.
So maybe it's just a luxury get, and when you can get a guy like Saquon, just take him, and it's hard to argue against it. Running backs seem to do pretty well this free agent period. Because DeAndre Swift, he went to Chicago for a good contract.
Hmm.
Uh, Derrick Henry went to Baltimore. We have, you know, um, other running backs. already getting signed on different teams. You're wondering what the Chiefs are up to. But were you surprised by this? Were you surprised by the Saquon pick, or do you think he will be who maybe a question would be who will be the best in their new home? Which players will play best in their new surroundings? Will it be Barkley in Philadelphia? What about maybe the one I just mentioned barely is Derrick Henry in Baltimore, another running first team, maybe gets better there. Is this what maybe tips Baltimore over the top? If they had Derrick Henry, would they have beaten the Chiefs, you think? Because they wouldn't have probably not run the ball. Their game plan against the Chiefs was fairly run light compared to some of their other games. So I don't. What do you think of Henry to the Ravens? And is that the best move? Do you think?
And what was the last part?
Is that the best move? Is that
Oh,
the best running pickup?
well, yeah, I mean, I think it in some ways may make Baltimore a little bit more predictable. Like always thought Baltimore's like, best feature was that you don't know what they're going to do. Even, it doesn't matter if Lamar Jackson drops back with the ball, he can still run it himself. But if he's handing off to Derrick Henry, then they're running with Derrick Henry, right? It's not like have that dynamic ability without keeping the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands. So I'm not quite sure how they plan to make that work and stay that dynamic without, you know, keeping like what they had before. Um, but yeah, it was basically it's like every team that seemed to lose a running back went out and got a different running back. So it was just a
Yeah,
big like cycle churned through the whole league apparently in the last like day or two with running backs
Josh
being
Jacobs went
everywhere.
to Green Bay. Tony Pollard to
Tennessee,
Tennessee. Joe Mixon to the Texans. Yeah, it seems like everybody picked up somebody. It seems like many teams. It just is sort of musical chairs of running backs almost.
Eckler to the Commanders.
Hmm.
Yeah, and Gus Edwards went to the
The
Chargers. So
Chargers, yeah.
yeah, so but yes,
It's
no Chiefs news on the running back front.
no Chiefs news on the running backs.
But maybe to jump back to the question that you asked a little bit ago too, is which running back do I expect to see have a better season between uh Saquon Barkley and Foreman no, who was
Derrick Henry, I was thinking of.
Swift, right?
A Swift going to Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean the two like the Eagles options, right? They had Swift, they let him go to Chicago, and uh Barkley is now in Philly. Like between Swift and Barkley, I would think that Swift is probably going to have more yards at the end of the year, just because Chicago is such running team too, and the Eagles like, also have to keep the ball in their quarterback's hands, who's also dynamic, like Lamar Jackson is too, right? So they're going to be doing similar options. Do you think Barkley and Swift will have similar years, or
It's hard to say, and you wonder like Barkley has had injury history. He's had some injuries in the past. And by this age, even though Barkley's only been in the league 5 or 6 years, it seems to me this is when running backs tend to break down, and the conventional wisdom lately has been, well, don't take a running back on his second contract or third contract, especially. And that's what a lot of these teams are doing now. They're taking Henry. Henry is up there in years for a running back. He seems to maybe be the exception to the rule in a lot of ways, that he's pushing probably 30 years old now. He's still really, really productive, but he's had injuries in the past. Yeah, but
yeah, he'll be 30 before the season starts.
maybe it says something. I think I've read the draft this year is not particularly strong in running backs.
Hmm.
So maybe that's one reason why the established running backs are doing so well, because the draft is a little bit running back light, and maybe the draft is running back light because running backs are starting to be undervalued in the pro ranks, and maybe fewer people are becoming uh, running backs and instead of playing, I don't know, tight end or some other position that wide receiver instead. It's hard to say. I don't know who's gonna have the best season. I'm a little bit afraid of the Henry in Baltimore. It seems like it's too good of a match. Maybe it's too good to be true there. Um, I don't yeah, it's hard to say what teams are gonna have the best success. I think maybe the Josh Jacobs pickup for Green Bay is not terribly good because I think Jacobs is he's not quite as dynamic as some of the other running backs that we've been talking about are. And I think they already had Aaron Jones, who's very good, up there. And
They're pretty similar styles
yeah,
of players, I think, right, between those two.
and Jones, yeah. And so I'm not sure about Green Bay's pickup there, but um, it's yeah, it's been interesting. It seems like this has been maybe the day or two of the running backs where we haven't heard much from running backs lately in the NFL.
Right.
Because they're seen as kind of fungible quantities that can be, exchanged, or quantities that can be used up very quickly. So we use them for their first few years of their rookie contract, and then we draft another one to run into the ground very quickly. So it's not the maybe the most fair if you're a running back, but it seems like that's how teams have been utilizing those players lately. I don't know how long Pacheco is going to be able to last for the Chiefs running the way he does. He's already had multiple surgeries and injuries,
Right.
and is he going to be used up he's got 2 more years on his rookie deal. Is he going to be used up by that point, or is he going to be ready for a big second contract um, like these other guys are?
Hmm. Yeah. No way to know right now. We have to see
Or
how.
maybe both. Maybe he's going to be used up, but he's still going to get a big second contract, and um, somebody's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad that we're talking about these humans in this kind of way, that they're just being run down and hit the grind of the NFL, which is very tough on running backs. But it seems to be the exceptions. Like, we don't have a lot of Frank Gores or Adrian Petersons any longer that can last 5, 10 years as running backs in the league.
Yeah. Yeah. There's usually only one or two of those, like in every generation, I guess, really, that are that durable for that long. That's not I mean, that wasn't common. Like, not every player from like the 60s played for 3 decades, right?
No, but you had, I guess, running backs that you'd think they would have 8, 9 year careers at least that
Yeah.
were strong. And you have like guys, even if they're not Emmett Smith or Barry Sanders, they're still like, Curtis Martin or somebody like that who lasts a long time. Or
Yeah.
um,
But they were the face of the
Eddie
team
George, that
more
kind
more
of
than
that
just
kind of level of player, maybe running backs that were could be used or as kind of workhorse running backs for at least more than 5 years, maybe closer to 10 years.
yeah.
You
Well, the
don't
more
see that.
the league has shifted to the QB than the running back. It's come at the expense of the running back, though.
Yeah, it's much more of a quarterback driven league, and there's some quarterback movement. Um, and I'm not talking about Drew Lock to the Giants. I don't know if you wrote him. He's as the backup, as probably the backup to Daniel Jones, I suppose. But there were some big moves, and probably the biggest was Kirk Cousins moving to Atlanta for 4 year. Was it a 4 year deal for $4 to $5 million
180
a
total, yeah.
season? He's just
45
coming
million.
off an ACL tear, not an ACL tear, an Achilles tendon tear, and who knows if he's going to be 100%, but that was a lot of money. Baker Mayfield signed a pretty big contract as well. There's some other
3 years,
uh
100 million to stay in Tampa. Yes.
but maybe the biggest deal was Russell Wilson to the Steelers for basically the league minimum, the veteran minimum, $1.2 million, and the Broncos are still going to be paying him 38 million, $39 million, something like that. Um,
38 of the 39 million will be paid by the Broncos.
would you rather have Russell Wilson at 1.2 million, or would you rather have Kirk Cousins at 45 million?
Yeah, the Steelers clearly won that one. I don't think there's even a question there. Do you find that as a question at all, or is that a
I don't know if, yeah, it's like ideas like Russell Wilson's not maybe Russell Wilson of old, but he's at least a serviceable quarterback, it seems like.
yeah,
And I don't, he's in the partly, yes, you're in the AFC. It's a much tougher league to move to the
yeah.
top of.
But the
Uh,
Steelers were nearly a playoff team
Kenny Pickett playing
with
or
yeah with a
Mason Rudolph.
disaster at the quarterback position. So I mean, just having a serviceable guy is a huge advantage, a huge step up from where they were, just a season ago. So that's yeah. I mean, Atlanta also had a disaster of a quarterback season last year, but they just need something, I guess, right? But this seems like an awfully huge sum to get somebody that's better, but I don't know how much better he is than maybe some of the other options that are out there.
Yeah, like trading for Justin Fields maybe would be an option that would have been good for Atlanta. I'm not sure either. I guess Cousins is a, I don't know, fringe top 10 quarterback, maybe when he's healthy, you think, something like that.
And he has Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, he has these weapons with him. I guess you think if you're the Falcons though, you've drafted, Drake London, you've drafted Bijan Robinson, you drafted Kyle Pitts, all these guys in the top 10. They just signed who they just Darnell Mooney they just signed as well. So they're bringing pieces into Atlanta, and you're in the NFC South, which is probably the weakest division in the weaker conference. So you think, well, now do you think the Falcons probably think they're Super Bowl contenders, at least from the NFC now? Do you agree with that, or do you think would you have done something else if you were Atlanta?
Well, I mean, it seems like they were neck and neck with Tampa for the division title last year without much at the quarterback position, and they probably outpaced Tampa's spending. I mean, they have to have, right? So, maybe
Yeah,
they've
and
edged ahead of Tampa. Like they're
if New
probably
Orleans as well, it's kind of
likely.
the three kind of mediocre teams at the top of the division, and then you have the utter disaster of
Distance.
Carolina at the bottom.
Yeah.
And Atlanta, I guess, was one of those three mediocre teams that you think with, somebody better than Desmond Ritter or Taylor Heineke wasn't he was the other guy
Right.
last year.
Right.
Um,
I think so. I mean, so maybe on paper they've edged ahead of the other two for the division title prospects. But I mean, yeah, Super Bowl, I don't know. I wouldn't say that at all, but I think they're probably in the lead for being the division title holder. Is that I mean, is that all you want? Is that probably not.
well, if you win the division, you're only 2 games away from the Super Bowl, and all you have to do is win one home game, maybe, or maybe two home games, if you're in the right spot, to
Yeah.
be in those title positions. And with you think, well, maybe the AFC, NFC East is down. You think Philadelphia, maybe because Philadelphia was sort of a disaster at the end of last year, and maybe they
Yeah.
don't turn it around. So maybe, and the Giants are, the Giants, and
The
the
Dallas Cowboys.
the Cowboys are, well, the
They're gonna win
Cowboys.
it. This is their year, Mike.
They have a good offense, but maybe no. Who knows what their defense is going to be like next year, and what their offense is going to be like next year. And Washington's is kind of a disaster usually. So maybe you think, well, there's nobody in the East. You do have the 49ers, of course,
Yeah.
out there out west, and maybe you could say the ascending teams in the north, the Lions and the Packers are both maybe they overachieved last year, maybe they're due to crash, and you say, well, now that's really just if the Falcons can play well, it's between the Falcons and the 49ers and the I don't know if that's maybe that's an optimistic way of thinking of it, but I think
Yeah.
maybe you could talk yourself into that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, hopefully
but
their fan base is thinking that, but I don't know that anyone else outside of that would be.
well, I guess you could say, well, even Minnesota when they had Kirk Cousins, they still lost a bunch of games early on in the season. Uh, but I don't know if that was their fault or not. But Cousins is he's a solid player, but I
Yeah.
think I guess he has played well in a dome before too, and he's an I think I think it was an overpay, but I don't know. That seems to be the going rate though for solid quarterbacks is over $40 million. So Daniel Jones gets 40 million, so I guess you have to give Kirk Cousins 45.
Yeah. What about Gardner Minshew to the Raiders? That was only two for 25 million, 2 years for 25 million. It's 12 and a half a year.
Yeah, I'd almost rather have Gardner Minshew than but he doesn't get a whole lot of respect as a starting level quarterback. I think he's
Yeah, but
up
he played solidly last year as a replacement starter. He wasn't meant to be the starter in Indy, but he
and he
did
got the team to a
serviceably.
hair's breadth from playoff berth.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
yeah, it's I think he's serviceable. He's one of those fringe starter backup guys. Maybe he's I think he's probably better than some of the starters, but he's not he's like maybe a top his height is probably top 20 starter level maybe or mid tier starter, but but it's one of those things where if you're the Raiders, well, you already have a guy like that in Aiden O'Connell, I guess, and maybe you want to draft a quarterback that has higher upside, but I don't know what bringing in Minshew does, but
yeah,
I guess it signals that you're going to be competitive, and if you have a good defense, and they can say the Raiders will they beat the Chiefs, so they can beat anybody.
yeah.
I don't know. I'd rather I'd probably I think Minshew probably in Atlanta would have been just almost as good as Cousins in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I think Cousins is fine, but I'm really leery of him how he recovers after that ACL, and he's gonna again play on artificial turf, and that's he's 36, something like that. Russell Wilson kind of fell off a cliff. Some people were believing, uh, and now he's getting paid $40 million not to play for the Broncos. So I don't know. It's risky, I think, but I can understand why they did it, but I'm not sure if it was the wisest course of action.
Well, then, well, like the Steelers, then immediately by saving so much money at their quarterback position, immediately went out and signed more defensive help. I think they got Patrick Queen from the
The Ravens,
Ravens.
yeah,
So then they've got even an even stronger defense than they in theory had already.
yeah,
So yeah, it's just from a GM perspective, the cheaper you can get your starting quarterback, the more money you have to spend on other positions. So
so
you have a
yeah,
more complete team, I guess, at least if you
and the Steelers
spread that
picked up
around.
in a confusing trade. They traded Deontay Johnson for Dante Jackson,
Uh-oh.
corner. So they traded the wide receiver for a cornerback from Carolina. So they're really trying to bolster that defense, and get rid of, I guess, a somewhat problem. I don't know. I don't know if he was a problem, and he wasn't utilized very well in Pittsburgh some of the time. But you would think with Russell Wilson, you need somebody to throw the ball to. Now it's George Pickens and I'm not sure who. The decent running backs. Um, between Warren and Harris, but there's not a lot of passing options. Maybe this is where you do it in the draft or something like that. But it's yeah, I like what the Steelers
Well,
are thinking.
it may be that once the quarterbacks have made their moves, then maybe they'll help recruit the wide receivers they know work best for them. Do you think that's how? Because it doesn't seem like many wide receiver free agents have been signed yet. It's not signed
Well,
to
there have been a few,
few,
I guess.
but it's not like the running backs. Like all of the top running backs have moved somewhere already. And
Yeah, and so
almost all the top quarterbacks have gone somewhere. But
and Zach
if you're
Moss
looking
went
at like the
to
lists of like the players who, you know,
yeah.
available still, the wide receiver one, it still has a bunch of gaps in it, at least.
Yeah, it seems like the dominoes, the way it started out was quarterbacks, a few receivers, but not as many. But it was running backs, and then maybe it's going to be receivers
Yeah.
after that. But if you want to talk about the Chiefs, they haven't made a whole lot of news. They signed tight end Irv Smith from who did he play for a lot? Who Cincinnati last year. He played. He
Cincinnati.
started. He was drafted by the Vikings in the second round from Alabama a few years ago, and was thought to be a promising up and coming tight end. He's still only 25 years old, so he's still pretty young. So maybe it was a kind of buy low reclamation project for the Chiefs there. But that's basically the only splash they've made, other than signing some of their old guys back. They signed Drew Tranquil. They signed Deion Bush back. Um, and they also, of course, signed Chris Jones to a huge contract, 5 years, almost $160 million.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What,
did
95 guaranteed?
mhm. Were you surprised by the Chris Jones deal? Do you think that signals that the Chiefs are all in for a potential three-peat?
Well, I mean, it's an end to the saga that, of the fans and Chris Jones and the Chiefs all trying to figure out what they all were going to do, right? So it's nice to finally have a conclusion to it. And it's nice that Chris Jones is going to stay in Kansas City. I think he was a great piece for the team. He just played well and was a really important defensive player for the team to have. So it's great to see him staying.
Yeah, I think last
It
year at
is.
this time too, we thought Jones probably screwed things up because he didn't get the big contract, but he played a year on the franchise, or he got a 1 year deal, franchised with a little bit few incentives here and there, but then he ended up doing it for another year and got a huge deal that he wanted. So it seems like it's worked out well for him as well as the Chiefs. It's hard to say how much money the Chiefs will have to spend now that, although Jones is only, I think this year he's only 7.5 million or something like that on the.
Well, yeah, so they
Uh,
ended up saving quite a lot of money from what, if they decided to use the franchise tag on Chris Jones, it was going to cost him $32 million for this season, the 2024 season. This way they signed him for the 5-year deal. 3 of the years are guaranteed. This season, his cap hit's only 7.4 million. So that's a big savings over what the 32 would have been if they used a franchise tag on him. So maybe there's some difference there they can use to, bring in someone else or try to keep Snead, maybe try
Snead
to
maybe, yeah,
keep him.
Snead. Maybe the big one of the big stories was Snead hasn't been traded, and some of the other cornerbacks have signed contracts, and some of the teams that were maybe thinking of going after Snead um, signed free agent cornerbacks. So maybe the Chiefs won't get maybe what they were hoping to get in the Snead market, and might just keep them for another year, or maybe try to get a negotiated longer term deal. So it's been an interesting first couple of days of free agency during this so-called legal tampering period.
Right.
Um, do you see the Chiefs signing anybody else big, or is it just a matter of keeping who you have?
I think they may still look at a wide receiver, but I'm not positive. I obviously don't know, but I don't. I'm
Curtis
outside of that. I'm not
Samuel,
sure.
Hollywood Brown, Odell Beckham,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't have any idea who they might go
either.
for, but I think if they're looking, if there's going to be a different free agent signing, it'll probably be from the wide receiver position, whether or not it's a very high, you know, rated player or, some value player they find, down below, like what's considered to be like the top remaining free agents, but maybe there's somebody they find value in that they want to take a shot on. If they've decided that Rashee Rice is the number one guy going forward, then they don't need to go get somebody to compete with him for that spot. They just need someone to pair with them, or you know be a different type of receiver, so they don't have the same person on both sides of the field. So
Yeah.
maybe they can save some money and get more of a complementary player than what they we would expect them to be going after before this anyway, right?
Yeah, yeah. And this is a draft that seems to be pretty good from the wide receiver position. So maybe they're going to just rely on draft picks to bolster what was last year a pretty weak position group, even though it was strong enough to win the Super Bowl. It was during the regular season, especially the receivers as a group were not terribly strong. So they have to replace. Well, in some ways, it's just numbers. They have to replace Mark MVS, who they got rid of.
Yeah,
They need to bring in at least one guy, and probably who knows if Hardman's going to be around again. Just general attrition. They need to bring in new people, and it's
yeah,
who are they going to bring in? I guess is the question.
yeah, yeah.
Um, should maybe we can we leave some of those questions till next week because we'll find out a lot more within the next week in terms of NFL free agency. Should we move on to uh, our second topic of the day, which is men's NCAA men's college basketball? It's we're in March, we're approaching March Madness, and we are in the midst of conference tournaments. Should uh do you want to describe, Dr. Scaff, our arrangement that we've made for conference tournament action?
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at we've what 6 different conferences that we're going to pick who we think will be champions from. We're each going to pick 2 different teams, uh, various odds from FanDuel, and we're going to see if we can not lose all of our money. I think is our goal, right? That's pretty much what it
Yeah,
is.
we want to at least try to make some of our money back and not lose it. So
Yeah, I
we've
don't know if
made
we can do
two.
that. This is like so much of a crapshoot in this one. I don't know. Like I don't feel nearly as confident betting outside of like football. So the conference tournaments are like so spread out as to what how much you can actually pay attention
Yeah,
to. I
we
don't
bet
expect
twelve
this to
hundred
go well,
dollars
but we'll see
each.
what we do. Right? Yeah.
So we bet on basically the Big Six, Power Six conferences. We'll include the Big East along with the football Power Fives, and we each bet on two of those teams to win the conference tournament. We laid down $100 on each, imaginary dollars, of course, on each of those teams. And do you want to run through our conference tournament picks and we can see who we'll find out by the next week who was the wiser between us and whether either of us or perhaps both of us end up making a little imaginary money.
Let's do it. I think we started alphabetically with the ACC. You won the
Yes,
imaginary coin toss, so you got to pick first.
The Atlantic Coast Conference tournament's underway this weekend, and I believe North Carolina and Duke were both co-favorites, uh, each at plus 175. I didn't want to bet on Duke, so I decided to take North Carolina at plus 175. Um, and I also took Pitt at plus 1,000 for my second pick. Which how about you, Dr. Scaff? Who did you take in the ACC?
I didn't really want to take Duke either, but since you had taken North Carolina, it kind of left me like having to take Duke. Chances are one of the two of them will win. I will take. So I ended up taking Duke at plus 175, as you mentioned, and also Wake Forest at plus 1200 is my
So you stayed in
outside
North
pick.
Carolina. I decided to go venture outside of Tobacco Road and up to Pittsburgh, which is close to sort of my sort of local home team in this area from the ACC is Pitt. So yeah, the Panthers plus 1,000. Um, how about yeah, we don't, who knows who's going to win that tournament, but um, like you said, it's probably going to be North Carolina. North Carolina. It's been a kind of a two-horse race in the ACC this
Problem.
year, North Carolina and Duke. So it's probably one of those two. But maybe Pitt or Wake Forest can sneak in there, and if one of those two do, we'll be covered. Um, the Big East is even more of a maybe one horse race this year, and it was UConn is the favorite, and UConn
Defending
uh,
national champion UConn, right?
defending national champion UConn was minus 160. For UConn, did you take UConn as your team, Dr. Scaff, or did you go elsewhere for your picks in
I
the
don't
Big?
like the negative odds though when making these picks. So I tend to like if it was just UConn or the field, I probably would just take the field. But I decided to pick not UConn. So I chose first. I chose Creighton plus 390 as my
Great
first
plus
shot.
390. Um, I picked, so basically we're left mostly with small Catholic schools in the East or the Midwest for the Big East. So I took Marquette at plus 600 for my first pick. How about your second pick in the Big East?
I went with St. John's at plus 1300.
And I went with Villanova plus 2,000. So we're sticking with those
So you also
Catholic
left
colleges.
UConn on the board,
We
uninterested
left
in.
UConn on the board. Creighton, Marquette, St. John's, Villanova were our four. Those were the four teams with the best odds um, outside of UConn. So maybe one of us should have picked UConn, but we still would have be losing. We still wouldn't be winning money in the Big East if UConn won. So I think that's why we ended up wanting to pick teams with a little bit longer odds in the
We
Big
can go
East.
ahead and write in UConn as the likely winner then, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
UConn's been one. Well, we'll talk about the top teams that have been in the uh there've been basically three really top teams in basketball this year. UConn is one of them in the Big East, and in the Big Ten, we have another one of these top teams in Purdue. Um, I decided not to pick Purdue though. Purdue, I believe, is was even odds at plus 100 to win the Big Ten tournament. I decided to go with the second favorite team, Illinois, at plus 310 for my first Big Ten pick. And then I believe you went with you decided to take Purdue though.
I did. I did snag Purdue this time. At least they're even odds, so it's like not, you know, passing up too much money anyway to take that one, I think. And they've been quite dominant in the division this year, so
And I took the surprising Nebraska Cornhuskers at plus 900. Then Nebraska hadn't really had a good team for several years with Fred Hoiberg, the former Iowa State Chicago Bulls coach on the bench. Nebraska has been pretty solid this year in the Big Ten. They are the third best odds of anybody, and they're plus 900. So it's a good, decent amount of money if in case Purdue gets knocked off here. They're probably guaranteed a number one seed no matter what. So maybe they aren't really playing for a whole lot, just to stay healthy in the Big Ten tournament. So maybe you'll get a team like Nebraska to upset one of those top teams. So I went Nebraska plus 900.
then I ended up going with Michigan State at plus 1400, mostly because they seem to always figure out how to play their best basketball when it gets to tournament season. So Tom Izzo seems to always bring any group of players together at this time of the year. I wouldn't bet against them if they didn't,
Yeah,
unless you
Michigan's
really knew they were already out or all their players were injured. They've still got a shot. to go deep in the tournament every year.
Yeah, Michigan State's always they're a battle tested team usually, and they're usually one of the teams that can usually win you a game or two when they need to, even if they aren't going to go all the way. They still have a knack of getting far into these tournaments. So I think that's a good pick as well. But Dr. Schaff, you got the first pick in the Big 12 because I believe you wanted to pick your alma mater. I did not pick my law school alma mater, Penn State, in the Big 10. They were a distant. They were not nearly as bad as sometimes, though, in the Big 10. They were 9-11 in the conference, and they were close to 500 overall. But I don't think Penn State's usually not known for their basketball team. But Iowa State, though, this year has been a very solid basketball team, and one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Big 12 all year long. And I believe you picked Iowa State as your first team.
Yeah, they did stumble in the final game of the regular season where they still had a chance to try to claim a share of the regular season title, but they did drop their final game. It ended up being not mattering because Houston destroyed Kansas in the final game of the year to have sole possession of the conference championship, regular season title. So I'm maybe not 100% sure that Iowa State is playing their best basketball right now, but they're pretty close to it. Hopefully they find another gear for the tournament now that knowing that they're the 2 seed even going into this. They should have a good shot at it though, although Houston is very, very good this year. But yes, Iowa State plus 450.
I decided to go with my first pick in the Big 12. Houston is the overwhelming favorite at minus 115, but I decided to pick for my first pick Baylor at plus 550. They were the third place team, third seed in the Big 12 this year, so I decided to pick them at plus 550. I did, however, pick Houston as my second pick at minus 115, even though it's negative odds, but I thought Houston's been so good. I felt like it's even if I got them and it would be almost, I thought leaving that money on the table was not good. I would have been wasting it maybe on K-State or somebody like that. So I decided to pick Houston as at minus 115 for my second pick. So I skipped them first, but then decided to pick them second.
I ended up going with another defensive, like physical team for my second pick, and I went with BYU at plus 1200.
Yeah, BYU's been scrappy all year. The Storm and Mormons, and they've been pretty good in their early years of the Big 12. The Big 12 is going to look a lot different next year with Oklahoma and Texas both gone, and then the addition of these Pac-12 teams. We'll talk about the Pac-12 is our next conference. I believe you also picked first for the Pac-12 this time, Dr. Scaff. Who did you pick as your number one tournament favorite in the Pac-12?
Well, I think we both made our first picks on future Big 12 schools. I went safe with my first pick and took the favorite Arizona minus 150, even with the negative odds.
Even with the
I
negative
said
odds,
the
you went with
reason why I
Arizona.
didn't pick stuff earlier. Now I'm using it anyway. So I don't know what my strategy is here, Mike.
Well, I think your strategy is that they're probably going to win, and you might as well take that. And I decided to pick Colorado, the second highest team, at plus 480. Again, like Arizona, another team that's going to be in the Big 12 next year, along with Arizona State and Utah. Neither of whom I picked for my second pick, which was Washington State at plus 700. Who did you pick for your second pick, Dr.
Washington
Scott?
State is a remaining member of the Pac-2.
One of the remaining Pac-2, along with Oregon State. Yes.
For my second pick, I went a little longer odds with Oregon at plus 1200. Although they won't be playing any of their games on that horrible, horrible floor that they use.
Oh, the green floor. Yeah.
The forest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's oh man, that floor is so awful.
Oregon is very well, they are known to be very bold in their color and uniform choices, and usually I do not agree with those color and uniform choices, but I guess they are I guess I'm not the target audience probably for
Yeah.
Oregon athletics,
I'm
but
not a fan of Oregon in general, I guess. Then are you?
I like the state in general, but I'm not a fan of the athletic uh, color scheme. I prefer the older Donald Duck logo of the Oregon Ducks,
Yes.
and that was my favorite.
Great.
Uh, but now moving on to the SEC. I was allowed to pick first here because of my alma mater, undergraduate alma mater, Arkansas. So there were um, yeah, so I had two alma mater conferences. We did not pick the Ivy League. Unfortunately, Yale, I believe, lost in the Ivy League tournament. They were
Oh.
the favorites to win, but they lost, so they are not going to be making the tournament probably from the Ivy League. But in the SEC, Arkansas has had a pretty dismal season this year. They're coming off, I believe, three consecutive seasons where they've been at least a Sweet 16 team, but this year they're not even going to make the tournament unless they win the tournament, which I don't believe they will. Um, but
Oh, it was your
Tennessee's
chance to back them though.
it is my chance to back them at, I believe, um, plus 25,000 odds. So if I were,
You'd
that's
win the betting competition.
I would.
On your own alma mater.
I would if I would just if I had 100 real dollars, I would bet 100 real dollars on Arkansas if I really thought they were going to win. But I
Yeah.
decided instead bet on Tennessee, the shortest odds at plus 175. Tennessee's been the best team mostly in the SEC this year. So Tennessee at plus 175. That was my first pick.
Do you know who the top player on the team is right now?
For Arkansas?
For Tennessee.
Um, no, I do not.
I just wanted to see if you knew how to pronounce his name. Go ahead, look up the top player and just tell me how you pronounce his name.
I know Rick Barnes is the coach. Let's see. Uh, Let me see. One sec. So then, are we talking about, is this Dalton Connect?
Do you know? I mean, do you know who he is, or are you?
I would say Connect, but he might be Necked.
Yeah, you actually said it right, correct. The how he says it the first time.
Connect.
Connect. Yeah.
Yeah, Dalton Connect.
Yeah.
Um, German, in the German way, you would pronounce the K. So it looked very German to me, so I said Connect. Dalton
The
Connect.
Dalton isn't really a giveaway though, because that could be anything.
No.
As to whether or not it's the German pronunciation or not. Yes.
Well, fortunately, Dalton pronounces it the old German way, the K.
Yes. Not the silent K, apparently. So you went Tennessee first. I went with perennial blue blood, plus 400 Kentucky. Probably one of your favorite programs. Am I right?
No, but they are a good team and they should, it's a good pick. I decided to go a little further afield though for my second pick, and I decided to go with South Carolina plus 5,000. South Carolina is one of the teams that tied for second in the SEC conference this year. They were only a game behind Tennessee. They are 15th in the country right now. They're 25-6 record. And for some reason, they're plus 5,000 compared to the other ones. Other teams around them, like Florida, the teams they tied, Alabama, Auburn, in the SEC, they also have higher odds than Florida at plus 1,600. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on South Carolina at plus 5,000. Maybe there's something I don't know that is happening with the South Carolina program, but I decided to go with South Carolina plus 5,000 just because I thought maybe there's something there. I'm
Yeah, I wonder if they have to play an extra game in the tournament because maybe the top 4 teams get buys, and then
And it doesn't explain quite like Florida though.
they were the
Is
odd man out that ended up having to play an extra game. But that shouldn't, you wouldn't think that would change the bracket by that much.
yeah.
So they ended up as the 5 seed.
So South Carolina is.
So
I'm looking at the
they'll
Ken
play the winner.
Pomeroy rankings. They're the number 47 in the Ken Pomeroy rankings, so maybe they have been over successful. The top teams in the SEC are actually Auburn is number 1 in the SEC, number 4, Tennessee is number 5, Alabama number 11, Kentucky number 17, Florida number 30, Mississippi State number 39, and then South Carolina number 47 in the Ken Pomeroy ranking. So maybe the computers don't like South Carolina, and that's why they're a little bit
Well,
lower.
they
So
they did get pushed to that 5 seed, and that does make them play an extra game than the top 4 teams, at least anyway.
mhm. But that is quite as why I explain why by Florida's only plus 1600. They still have to play that
They play an
extra
extra
game
game
as
too.
well.
But unfortunately for South Carolina, they're on the same bracket side as Tennessee then too.
Maybe that's why.
And then Florida would have to they played if they get through their first game, they play Alabama and then have Kentucky up, in the semis. Uh, where South Carolina has to beat the winner of Arkansas Vanderbilt. So your own alma mater might take them out before they get to Auburn or Tennessee, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I don't know. But still, I think that's why they ended up with the higher number, at least anyway, on the odds. But why they ended up, that far up, I'm not sure. Plus 5,000 seems like you found a bargain though for
I hope. I hope.
a team with a good chance to go on still. It's not impossible by any means. And then let's see, what did I take on my last pick? I went safer. I went with Auburn at plus 240 for my second and final SEC, and I guess that's our final pick, right, from the conference championship brackets.
Yes. So we'll know next week how well we did, and we'll also introduce our NCAA tournament brackets. We had a number of different strategies last year, if you remember correctly. We did just our own potential choices, which actually were quite good until we got to the Final Four, which was a very unusual Final Four. If you remember correctly, it was no team above a 4 seed made the Final Four. It was, I think Connecticut was the top seeded team. They won. They were a 4th seed. They
Yeah.
were. It was Florida Atlantic. Was it Florida Atlantic and San Diego State and Miami, Florida were the other 3 um, teams. So it was a very unusual Final Four. None of the blue bloods except Connecticut were in it. So we'll
Yeah, we're
see
gonna
what
have to decide
happens.
what we're gonna do this year for our bracket challenge. It's gonna be the same as last year, or if we're gonna do something totally different. We'll have to make some decisions here in the next week, Mike.
We do, but fortunately, we have a few days to do it and decide. But we'll see how these turn out next time. Um, and do you want to move on from basketball and move on to Major League Baseball and talk about the Kansas City Royals and their position players? Talk about the infield situation going on with the Royals.
Let's do it.
All right. So do you want to move around the diamond, or do you want to how do we want to do these?
It makes sense if we moved around, yeah, by position, I guess, right? To some extent.
Okay. Yeah. So you start with first base.
Sure.
So it looks like the Royals have 2 kind of first base candidates. I guess you might say Sal Perez is another one of those first base candidates.
And then there's some other guys too that might play first over the year as the season goes on.
Yeah. I was thinking probably we have Vinny Pasquantino and Nick Prado are the 2 primary, where first base is their primary position.
Right.
Pasquantino was injured last year. He tore his shoulder labrum in June, ending his season. And he's played 2 years with the Royals, each about a half season in each season. 19 home runs total for the Royals and 489 at bats. Um, he was an 11th round draft pick by the Royals in 2019. He's 26 years old now. So yeah, I think you think Pasquantino has the inside track, assuming he's healthy
I
for the
think
first base job.
so. Yeah, he had a pretty decent season before the injury. Was an over above average OPS plus even just barely my 101 last year. But didn't manage to accumulate much WAR at least anyway. He's mostly hitting in the middle of the lineup, so I think he's a guy they have a lot of hope for being able to secure that spot. How has he done in spring training? Do you have those stats open still for the spring training data, or if not, it's okay. But if you still have it open, I was just curious if you saw how
um,
he's doing.
I don't have the open anymore. Let me grab them real quick. I believe he Pasquantino has been okay in spring training, not terribly good. It's only been 9 games he's played.
Right.
Batting 200 with 286 on base percentage. But his rival Nick Prado is actually playing very very well. Although Prado struggled when he has been playing in the majors. Prado is batting 400 so far this year in spring training. Has 2 home runs, 9 RBIs. Nick Prado had a minus 1.3 WAR last year, but he is the former first round draft pick from 2017 out of high school. Um, he's been a star player since his Little League days. Did you know that Nick Prado was the 2011 Little League World Series victor? He hit a walk-off single against Japan to win the 2011 World Series for his California uh, team. So
Okay.
he
Did not know
so
that.
he is along with Salvador Perez, one of the world's few World Series winners that the Royals have on offense. Um,
Right.
and of course we have Will Smith, who's won several World Series, but none for the Royals. But
Not with Casey Lewis.
Nick Prado he's only hit 216 with a 364 slugging percentage in his major league at bats. So he hasn't been very strong, not nearly as strong as Pasquantino has been, but maybe you could say he has the pedigree, and maybe he's finally getting it after a few years of struggling in the minors, and maybe I think a lot of people thought he was going to be a bust. Prado maybe not even make the major leagues, but he's at least made the majors now, and
Mm.
maybe is they're challenging along with Pasquantino for the first base job.
And he did show some flashes of being a pretty solid player. But yeah, his overall stats have not been terribly impressive so far. But he has also played some corner outfield defensively too. So like he sort of has added some value to the team, I think, at least anyway, for having the roster spot. So, you know, even if Pasquantino is playing first, Prado still can play in left or right if they need his
Yeah,
bat in the lineup. And it does seem like the way this team is structured right now that there may be players moving around on a day-to-day basis since there are so many players that play multiple positions.
yeah, it
And
seems to be what
no necessarily, very clear cut uh, edge as to who's going to be the primary person at each position. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting season, I think. To see, especially to see how the team handles all of these players.
Yeah. So I think that's our first base, probably. You want to
Yeah.
move on to second base? We have a couple of different possibilities for second base. The incumbent starter was Michael Massey, still only 26 years old, a fourth round draft pick by the Royals in 2019. He had only batted 229 though in his first full season last year, but he had some real promise. And I think the Royals still think a lot of him. So I think Massey, at least if he plays decently in spring training, Massey probably starts the year at second. Is that your guess?
I think that's what their plan is. I mean, I think they really like him because he actually has home run potential from the second base position, which is something that the team has never really had before. So I think they really want to give him as many chances as they can to succeed there because I mean, having power from second base is something that they've only dreamed of as a franchise, I think, really. And uh, if he can do that, then he'll be beloved here forever, I think. Right?
Yeah, I think, yeah, they brought in, I guess probably Adam Frazier is probably the challenge he has at second.
Mm-hmm.
Frazier plays second. He can also play the outfield. He's maybe utility. He can be a super utility guy. He spent most of his career with Pittsburgh, but has played for the Padres, the Mariners. Also played for the Orioles last year, so he had some playoff experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's a career 269 uh, hitter, 331 on base percentage, 393 slugging. He had 13 home runs last year. So he's worth 1.7 WAR, 13.9 in his career. So he's been a solid player, defensively, especially, I think, during his career. So he can play kind of anywhere, but it seems like he might, if Massey stumbles, will probably be there to step in at second base.
So knowing how the team has handled these types of acquisitions, do you think Massey will be the opening day starter, or do you think the team will see Frazier as a trade piece and use him as the opening day starter over Massey to see if they can move Frazier
Hmm.
deadline?
That could be something that they might try. I think though if Massey plays well, they're just going to keep Massey there and maybe put Frazier in as a guy who plays utility and still probably plays most, 3 or 4 days a week, but
Yeah.
isn't technically a starter. I think um, it would be a nice. The Royals would think they have a nice problem. It'd be a nice problem for them to have if Massey plays really well and if Frazier is available and able to do what he does normally. So I don't. I I could see them trying to trade Frazier, but I could also see them just trying to, if somebody's going to get injured, and it's good to have as many decent bats and decent gloves in the lineup as you can find. Um, I don't know if we want to include Garrett Hampson in that second base list or not. Utility infielder signed. Uh,
He's
Spent most of the
definitely a
year
super
with
utility guy.
Colorado. Played last year with the Marlins. 1 year, $2 million contract. So not a huge contract, but he's another guy that could be a utility player, maybe second base material.
Yeah,
Also, you could,
he
yeah,
had a little bit better numbers than what I was expecting when I heard about him being a utility player. But yeah, his numbers actually weren't terrible last year. Did you notice that when you were looking at your?
yeah, 276
Yeah,
batting average, 349 on base percentage, 380 slugging percentage in 98 games. So, um, pretty good on base percentage, especially. Um, he's 29, so he's a veteran. Maybe not, he's not quite as old as Frazier is, so he maybe doesn't quite have the maybe risk of falling, off a cliff that maybe you could think Frazier does. But 32 is not usually where infielders really do that. But I think you also have to think of maybe Nick Lofton as one of those people that could challenge in place second base because you think those other positions are maybe a little bit more entrenched. We'll talk about shortstop and third base. We already talked about first base. There's not as much room, but maybe Nick Lofton, who played only a little bit in KC last year, but he had fantastic stats. He batted 323, and in only 62 at bats, he's still probably on the kind of edge of the roster. But he was a first round draft pick, and he is continued to uh, play pretty well in the spring as well. He's got an OPS of over 1,000 this spring, so maybe he's somebody that could, you know, challenge uh, for playing time
yeah,
in this
yeah.
in this infield.
Sorry, somebody just walked by. But yeah, and only 19 games last year. He did play at first, second, and third base, so he does have most of the infield there covered. Uh, and yeah, he still managed to hit some home runs. No, he did not hit any home runs last season though, right? But that's something that he'll be looking for his first this coming year then, right? The
Yeah,
Zips projections did have them contributing. Yeah, they have them over one WAR for the year at least anyway. So the projections actually see him as being at least serviceable.
the Royals have a lot of, it seems like, young infielders that could do something next year. Probably the best of these young infielders is easily Bobby Witt Jr. At shortstop. Um, he seems to be maybe the person that's most cemented into his position. Uh, uh, Bobby Witt's 23 years old. He was worth about 4.5 WAR last year, 30 home runs, 49 stolen bases, OPS of OPS plus of 120, so 20% above his average at position. He struggled kind of in the first half of the year, but then was on a tear in the second half of the season. So he's really a a budding superstar. And of course, the Royals also signed him to a huge, lucrative 11-year contract in the offseason. So I think Bobby Witt is, easily the bright spot probably in the Royals infield. Uh, do you expect even better things for him next year?
Yeah, I think so. How's he done in the spring? Have you looked at his spring stats?
Yeah, he's been solid. Not amazing. Batting 296, on base 310, slugging of 667, so a 977 OPS, so pretty good. Um, he's been just kind
Not bad.
of
Yeah.
he's got 3 home runs already in 9 games, so um, he's been pretty good. So he's just, I think, probably just treading water, trying to get to the regular season, working on his form, maybe trying to be a little bit better at the beginning of the season this year than he was last year. So, but he's really one of the young stars of the game. So, the Royals are fortunate to sign him for their big contract. I think they'll keep him a long time.
And his defense really came along as the season went on last year too. So like he was showed flashes of being really good, but also riskier. So maybe with that extra season under his belt, that yeah, he's picked up, some extra skills to make sure that he's not being reckless, at least anyway, with his youth.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we also
He,
have
he did
youth.
manage, like you said, a 4+ WAR for last season. Projections have him over a 4 WAR this year, also.
Yeah, he's still only 23 years old, so he's young. His third base partner on the left side of the infield is only 24, Michael Garcia. Um, yeah, he also can play shortstop if necessary. Um, he had a solid rookie season last year. He is Venezuelan. He was signed by the Royals in 2016 at the age of 16. Did you know he's a cousin of Alcides Escobar? Did you know
I did not know that. No,
Escobar were
it's
cousins?
pretty close.
I'm not sure if they were direct cousins or once removed or something like that. But
No,
uh, so for Royals, I would say, would you call Escobar a Royals legend?
I mean he was on the World Series team, so
He
I don't
had
know.
that. He had the inside the park home run to lead off the 2015 World Series.
Right.
One of the great defensive players for the Royals of all time.
Yeah, I mean he was the team really looked at his whether or not he would swing at the first pitch as a marker for success in the game as it was happening. So apparently
Yeah,
somebody had figured out that if he swung at the first pitch, then they had a much higher chance of winning the game than not. I don't
he
know
was the
why. It worked out
talisman.
that way though. So he would swing at everything basically at the beginning of it.
As Escobar goes, so went the Royals for those couple of years. Yeah. Um, so I think if Garcia can be as good as Escobar also had his detractors, but I think he was onto some of those great Royals teams. Um, and Garcia can be as good as his cousin, I think that would be good for the Royals. He's still only 24 years old, so he had 23 stolen bases his rookie year, only 4 home runs, but 50 RBIs. He had a solid batting, 272 batting average. So it seems like he is, you know, ready to continue to blossom. We hope at third base, but you can see maybe some of those utility guys. If Garcia gets hurt or if he stumbles a little bit, they could Lofton or Hampson or Frazier maybe could play third as well.
Yeah, and Garcia had taken over that leadoff spot in the lineup too, and that was
true.
Really helpful, I think, for Witt not having to hit leadoff, but being able to drive in more runs from the number 2 spot. And I think that helped the team out too. So it was nice to see somebody just kind of fill in, get moved into the role and then succeed and then hold on to the role. So that was one of the few people last year to emerge to really lock down like their position on the team and in the lineup.
And I guess that leaves catcher for us. Do you want to talk about the catching situation, Dr. Scaff?
Sure.
I can go as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have our 2 usual guys that we've been talking about for the last couple of years, as well as Sal Perez has been here for wow, how many years now has he been on the roster?
He's been on the roster for.
Did he come up in 2012?
This will be his 13th season if he came up in 2012. Just 12. This is his 12th season, it says, according to ESPN.
Okay. Yeah, last year though, even though he started to catch fewer games, he's down to only 90 games behind the plate last season. So he'll be splitting a lot of time between the DH and first base position if needed at first. Anyway, last season there were so many injuries that they were able to get Sal some time in at first, and he played fine at first too. So he's not even like a bad option there if they need both bats in the lineup, which is
I would say this would be Salvador's 13th season. I would count it as 1, 2, 3. 4, 6. Yeah, I would say he's played 12 seasons. This will be his 13th season.
Okay.
He's the Royals home run champ. He's really the last remaining link to the World Series teams of 2014 and 2015. He's maybe the most, probably the most famous and Royal since George Brett. Do you think in terms of his impact on the organization?
For sure, he's the face of the team, and it seems like he really keeps the team like attitude at the same level that he wants it to be. So it's always he's a fun guy, it seems like, and players really seem to like him. So maybe one of the more important things that he does is nothing to do with on the field at all, but just his attitude in the locker room and in the dugout.
Yeah, I think he
cornerstone for the team.
Sets the tone and is enjoys the game, but also is a very professional way of going about playing. And I think he's been great for the Royals and is maybe one of these kind of borderline Hall of Fame-ish guys, I would say.
Yeah.
If he maybe he won't, but he'll get some votes at least, I think, for the Hall of Fame.
Do you think he'll still be hitting 3 or 4 in the lineup, or do you think they'll end up shifting him around a little bit as he's moving on in his career, moving up?
Ideally you want to move him down because you have other hitters that can do better. Because one of the things that Perez is not going to be is a big on base machine.
Right.
So he's more of a free swinger. So, but he can still hit for power. But you would think hopefully maybe a number 5, number 6 hitter type would be ideal for Perez, where he's still kind of in the heart of the lineup, but not where he gets quite as many at bats as some of the higher on base percentage guys.
He still did manage 23 homers last season, and So 422 slugging percentage, which is not too bad for, an aging catcher. His
No,
WAR though was pretty low for the season, but
his slugging was lower than it had been in previous years, so maybe last year's a little bit of a down year for him, but hopefully maybe he can bounce back and get a few more extra base hits. But
yeah,
he played in more games last year than he had the
yeah,
previous as well. So, but a lot of that, like you said, was from the DH position, um, and it seems like Freddie Fermin has become the number two catcher. What do you have to say about Fermin, Dr. Scaff?
well, he's pretty good defensively, but maybe even more of a surprise though was like how good his bat was. I mean, he ended up having a higher slugging percentage on the season than Sal had even for the last year. Uh, Managed 9 home runs and 32 RBIs. But his OPS plus was over 100, even 112. Would you have thought that from a backup catcher who's maybe taking over more duties as the year goes on, type of guy?
No, yeah, he kind of came out of nowhere. Really, he's fairly, he wasn't young for a rookie last year. I guess he played 3 games in 2022, but he he really came on strong. He was worth, like you said, 1.7 WAR over the season. So and really only playing half a season's worth at bat. So he hit 9 home runs. Um, yeah, 461 slugging, like you said, higher than Salvador Perez. So, another strong Venezuelan behind the plate. So maybe, yeah, hopefully Fermin can keep at it. He's 28. He'll be 29 in May. So he's not young for an early career player, but maybe he's sort of a late bloomer though, and he'll be that solid number two catcher or somebody who can also fill in at DH when needed if Salvador's behind the plate. So
Then because they have MJ Melendez in the outfield, we'll talk about him next week. Were you a little surprised though that they brought on another catcher onto the 40-man roster and Austin Nola from the
Austin
Padres
Nola,
roster?
I guess, but you worry about injuries at this point, and especially in Perez's career, and you don't know if Fermin is a flash in the pan or not. So you want somebody who is going to be solid and capable, and I think Nola can do that. But I think ideally he's the number three catcher.
Yeah, and it may be a little surprising if he ends up being like on the opening day roster at least anyway, because I don't know how they would want to keep three plus an emergency catcher on the opening day active roster. It is so. I mean, he must still have options left because you don't need that many catchers on the active roster.
Yeah, Nola was not so good for the Padres last year. Only batted 146, but he's
Yeah,
usually decent 250-ish hitter behind the plate and
146. He did have
solid defensive catcher.
260 on base percentage though. What do you think about that? 146, but 260.
Yeah, he walks. Yeah, he had 18 walk. He had 19 hits, but he had 18 walks
Yeah,
last year in 50 games played. So he almost doubled his on base percentage from his batting average. So hopefully his batting average is a little higher and it continues his good eye if he ends up having to play. But if you're talking about your third catcher, though, if you can get any offensive production from your third catcher, that's gravy. You just want a solid guy behind the plate who can call a pretty good game and keep the pitching staff together.
right. Yes. Just don't break anything and try to, produce anything at all is fine. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter. Just don't
exactly.
break anything.
So overall, how do you feel about this Royals infield? Do you feel better than you did last year about this team, or you think there's still what do you think there are any weaknesses, or how do you feel about the infield?
I think it's going to all depend on how the team decides to use these guys. So like if they are rotating them around every day, different positions, different spots in the lineup, I'm going to be really annoyed with it. But I mean, I don't know how it really helps their development, but we'll have to see how that goes. Uh, the team organization seems to make some strange choices at times. So the first week of the season will be really telling as to what they're thinking, at least anyway. If they've settled down and figured out that like, oh, these players are going to be fine, we'll start slotting them in, somewhere. If they earn the spot and keep performing, then they can move up in the lineup or down in the lineup depending on how they play. That kind of thing is better than just random shifting for no reason, like every day. Hopefully, we won't be seeing that all the time from management. That is.
Yeah, you have the shift in both the lineup where they're batting in the order, but also where they're playing on the field. And it seems like
Yeah.
Cotrera last year kind of moved people around both a lot in both position and for both offense and defense. So maybe at least you want a little bit more stability. But if you have a lot of players that can play, maybe you want to get as many of them in as you can. So maybe there's something that you said, well, we have to move people around a little bit because we want to make sure we have, maybe we have six good bats, but we only have four positions. We only have, five infield positions and a DH. That we can use, and maybe we want to give people rests and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's it's difficult, I think, to do all that. Maybe, and we hope that Cuatrero has maybe figured things out a little bit more in his second year compared to his first year, because I know that was one of your big criticisms of him was the way he used players both in the field and in the lineup
Especially in the bullpen, but
and in the bullpen. Yeah,
and even in the rotation, honestly.
and in the rotation. It's is there going to be stability? That's the question. Is it going to be, or is it just going to be a free for all?
Yeah. Is it going to be by committee? Is it going to be, how are they going to do things? If it's, I don't, a lot of the, committee type stuff, I don't think works if you're trying to actually develop players. I think if you're just trying to get through part of a season, that kind of thing is fine. But if it's, you're trying to actually evaluate talent, you got to play guys in the same position, in the same part of the lineup as much as you can, just to see, you know, how much of an effect the player brings to it versus like your tinkering is as a manager. So, you definitely don't want to lose a season without learning anything about these guys and figuring out which ones are the ones you want to, build the franchise around. As some of these guys will still be on the roster when the team theoretically moves to the downtown stadium. So like this isn't just playing for today. This is, playing
Yeah,
for a long-term deal and playing for the future of the franchise. So hopefully they figure out that some of these guys are worth keeping around and not pass on them, right? So
yeah. You want to make sure you give everybody a fair shake, but also not spend too much time on them if you know that if you know they're not going to be turn out so good. We have there's not only these guys, but there are other players in the minors maybe that will use a look. We'll get a look this year. There'll be some injuries. There'll be some maybe non-roster guys even that get used this year, and we don't want to hold players down that shouldn't be held back. So there's a lot of juggling for a manager and for
yeah.
a general manager to do. So
What is really good about this roster so far, at least that we've looked at, is that everybody here is a major league player. They're not, are they going to succeed or not? Like, are they going to be good enough to make it to the majors? These guys are all have had major league at bats and they've had significant time on the major league roster. So we're not wondering if any of them can hack it. We kind of know they can already. And this is maybe one of the first Royals rosters in a while where we've said, we know they have a major league roster, but hopefully they can
yeah,
perform like a major league team for the whole season and not just part of it like they did last year.
yeah. You think so? Maybe since there was such a bad year last year, but maybe for player development, and it wasn't a wasted year for a lot of these guys. They did get some experience, even if the team did lose 106 games last year. Maybe it will be a good learning experience for the people for this year. Speaking of learning experiences, have we learned all we can learn today about the Royals and about basketball in the NFL? Should we wrap up our episode?
I think so.
All right. Well, I hope you learned as much as we did about the Royals and about the state of college basketball and the state of the National Football League. We certainly learned a great deal, both in our bloviating and pontificating, but also in our reading and research for today's episode. And we also thank you for your listenership, your viewership, and as always, I am Dr. Michael Werman. He is Dr. Andrew Scaff. We are the Morning Trek Power Hour. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast, available on many podcast delivery systems. Wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can probably find the Morning Trek Power Hour. And so find us and like us. And until next time, we'll bid you a good day.